we also hope that we can improve the quality of the fuel that's going into the vehicles that we are driving. And we will be proposing a low-carbon fuel standard. This was a recommendation that received unanimous consent amongst the MCAG members. And this is a policy designed to really improve the quality of homegrown biofuels in Minnesota. We have a very vibrant biofuels industry in this state, one that's made a fair amount of investment in innovation to reduce the energy inputs to the process that is used to convert, in most cases, corn into alcohol. We hope that a low-carbon fuel standard drives even further innovation in that sector, and combined with, I think, the important need for financial incentives to the ethanol industry to make those kinds of investments, we will be working on that issue this year. There will be a proposal to continue the work that was started last year around a suite of initiatives to improve land use planning, to collectively known as sensible communities, to, among other things, improve the ability of people living throughout the metro area and greater Minnesota to have access to better transit systems, to transportation alternatives, particularly alternatives to cars, and shorter driving trips to the services that they need, thereby reducing the number of vehicle miles we travel every year. The last thing I'll mention, and we've already had a fair amount of discussion about it, but just a couple of things I wanted to mention about the nuclear power moratorium. Obviously, we opposed this last year, as we have every time that it's come up. And the principal issue for me and my organization is that we have longstanding policy that would say that we should allow, of course, current nuclear plants to continue operating, but that before we build new nuclear power plants, we really need to solve the nuclear waste issue. And we're no closer to that today than we were in 1994, in my judgment. Some of the arguments that have been made here this morning, the reprocessing argument, for example, we heard testimony in the House Energy Committee last year that in France's reprocessing program, something like 3% of the volume of the total waste is reduced through reprocessing. That leaves 97% of the waste that's still highly radioactive and needs to be stored for tens of thousands of years. And so that, to me, does not represent a solution to the waste problem. It may be advantageous for other reasons, but it's not a waste solution. That question may come up again during the course of the questions this morning, so I'll leave it at that.
Great. Thank you, gentlemen. We'll have a little time for audience questions, but a couple of things that I wanted to sort of focus your thoughts on this morning. And the first of those is, as a Chamber of Commerce group, which really is promoting jobs and business and commerce issues, we're interested in learning what this green energy and green economy really can do for the growth of our overall economy, and whether there's opportunity in going to green energy, or is there a displacement of jobs that would be otherwise in the carbon-based economy, just moving over into a green economy. Can you give us your thoughts on how that works?
I'd like to perhaps... Let me try that. Is that working? Can you hear me? Thank you. It's not on? It's on. Okay. The whole green economy. Well, we don't want to do it if it's going to result in a net reduction in jobs. Now, that would not be a win in my estimation. And there's been some studies. There was a fairly famous study now that came out of Spain where they had implemented a lot of these green energy, green economy initiatives, and at least one economist's view of it was that it was resulting in 2.2 jobs lost for every green job created. And so that doesn't seem to me like a net gain for society. But my view of this is clean energy is the wave of the future. If you think back 150 years ago when we started the crude oil economy, if you will, we used whale oil or wood or coal or some other form, water power, as how Minneapolis got started, some other forms of energy. And when there was a transition to the use of fossil fuels as the primary means of energy around the late 1850s, 1860s. What we see coming ahead are some of these, what were considered alternatives, wind power, solar power, biomass power, which we think are going to be much more mainstream going forward. And the idea is, what can we do, what kind of policies can we put in place to accelerate a transition that we believe is going to come anyway? And do that in a way that creates opportunities and takes advantage of some of the resources and assets and advantages that we have in Minnesota, but does it in a way that doesn't drive out some of the energy-intensive industry that we have in Minnesota that provide good, high-paying, high-quality jobs. And I think there's a balance that can be struck by bringing in the new without driving out the old. And so that's, in my view, what the promise is of the clean energy economy. In fact, I see Liberty Diversified sitting right in front of me here, and they've been in the recycling business forever. And there's an example of something you don't think of as necessarily a clean energy job or a green job, but the recycling of old materials into new is exactly the sort of thing we should be encouraging. And it's been done forever, and there's a lot more that we could do. We heard about the energy efficiency. We're making great progress with that, and again, a lot more that can be done, but done in a way that doesn't drive up costs and doesn't drive out jobs.
Well, a couple of things on this. First of all, generally speaking, investments in clean energy, green energy, tend to be much more labor-intensive than their large capital-intensive energy supply investments tend to be. And so typically speaking, when you make investments in energy efficiency, for example, in clean energy alternatives, you tend to be displacing investments in labor for investments in capital. And since in a state like Minnesota that doesn't have its own in-state energy resources, we don't have coal, we don't have natural gas, we don't have uranium, all of the money that we spend to import those products leaves the state, whereas investments in wind energy and biomass energy that's grown here and bioenergy sources is all investment that stays within the state, both on the capital side and on the labor side. And so I think just intuitively, it should be obvious that we can grow our job base while not losing the advantages of capital investments in the state with a stronger emphasis on clean jobs. I don't know how many of you have had the chance to read Tom Friedman's book, Flat, Hot, and Crowded, but it really details in with a number of useful examples the ways in which this country is losing the race to capitalize on the clean energy economy that Bill and I agree are really the wave of the future. And while we're still responsible for a large number of the inventions that are leading the clean energy transition, most of those inventions are actually being developed overseas, China, India, Spain, Germany, and those economies are doing quite well, thank you, on the backs of those investments, and we're really losing our access to the real economic engine that would come with those. So.